Before I begin and sort of get into the questions, because we'll get right to it, Chief, I'd like to say that there's a lot of people here because I was doing the questioning, but I think they're here to see you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we have a number of folks here in the audience today. I think I saw Dave Jaworski, Mayor Jaworski from the City of Waterloo, joined us today. Sandy Shantz from Woolwich Township, Mayor of Woolwich. Diane Freeman, Councillor from the City of Waterloo, is over here. Helen Jowett, Regional Councillor from Cambridge, welcome Cambridge, is here as well. And I said, Richard Heptage is here. He's a fire chief from the City of Waterloo. I said 2 chiefs in one room. This is awesome to see. Thank you for joining us. Tim Anderson, the CAO of the City of Waterloo, is over here. And Joan Fisk, who's President and CEO of the United Way, is here as well. From our board of directors, and this is it. Oh, Tom Galloway. I knew Tom was here. I was just testing the police services chair to see.
My boss.
Yeah, your boss. Councillor Galloway from the City of Kitchener, from Regional Council as well. And from our board of directors, Glenn Thorpe, Sean Sullivan from Gowlings, and Kelly McManus from the University of Waterloo. So we appreciate everyone coming today. So I think we'll dive right in, and Police Chief Larkin and I were talking, I don't know, a couple of months ago, said I think it's time to come back. There's lots that's happened. It's been about 2 years, and a lot of water's gone under the bridge since then. And I guess we will start with what I guess is most topical, frankly, which is marijuana and the legalization of marijuana, how it's going to be distributed, the effect it's going to have on the community. How do you see, I mean, there's lots of discussion in the media that are we really ready for it? Is the distribution mechanism going to be in place? How is it going to affect crime but also the usage of it as it relates to driving and those sorts of things? How do you see it unfolding for the Waterloo region? Are we ready for it? Is your service ready for it? And what does it mean for our community?
Well, thanks, Ian. And just maybe before I get into that question, if I can just take a moment to say thank you to everybody for getting up so early this morning to join us for a networking breakfast. And thanks to our sponsor, MNP. I'm very pleased to have a great, incredible team that is joining me from our service as well. And I'm very proud to have them. And I just want to take an opportunity also to thank the Chamber. The Chamber is an important part of our economic prosperity in our region. And equally, as a police service, we also recognize that our regional reputation, our regional economic prosperity is often connected to policing, to the fear of crime, to public perception about the safety of our community, and all the great community safety things we do. And so business is a very integral part to that, and it's very important. So I wanted to take a moment just as a preamble to recognize all of you, and it's great to be here. And it's interesting, and I'm happy to see that there are no sort of sampling on the table of cannabis or edibles because it's not legal yet. And so cannabis has been a really interesting dialogue. I think we've been at this for a couple of years. There's been lots of different discussion and lots of different media stuff around, are we ready, are we not ready? And I think on October 17th, I want to be very clear, I don't believe there's going to be reefer madness in Ontario, in Waterloo region. The reality is that cannabis has been widely used in our community in Ontario and in Canada. In fact, we should pause for a moment and start asking some questions around why are young people between the age of 20 and 24 the greatest consumers in Canada than any other nation in the world. And I think it's tied to a larger discussion of what's happening in our community in Ontario and in Canada is around substance use, addiction, and I know we've got the great friends from Waterloo, Wellington, the Lynn are here who are doing a lot of work around this process. But cannabis in itself, the Canadian chiefs and the Ontario chiefs and myself included, I'm not sure 28 years ago when I started in policing, I always believed I would see the decriminalization of cannabis. And in fact, a former chief, Chief Greville, as his tenure as the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police was actually trying to work with government to decriminalize back in the 90s. So this discussion has been around for a long time, Ian. And our current government, federal government, decided that, let's deal with organized crime and the illicit trafficking, because that's who's, quite frankly, marketing and manufacturing and distributing right now is organized crime. we're fueling a significant amount of other criminal activity based on the consumption of cannabis. And the other piece to this is that young people are significant consumers. And if you look at sort of even the alcohol industry, alcohol sales, alcohol consumption is on the decline, and cannabis and other synthetic drugs are on the increase. And so on October 17th, what changes? The reality is one of the big things for us as an employer, and all of you as employers, the reality is we've probably been dealing with this, but what does it look like for fit for duty? And for us as an organization, I know all of you want to make sure that we have healthy, vibrant police officers able to respond, able to deal with crisis situations. And so how does that work? The reality is that we have that process and that robust capacity now where we look at, we're human. Our workforce is from society. That's where we recruit from. So people come to our workplace with, financial challenges, family challenges, substance abuse challenges. Maybe they're on some type of prescription medication that has side effects, etc. But a couple of major pieces for me from the seat that I sit in as the chief and as your chief is around road safety. And so it's largely, again, not naive to think that people do not consume and drive now. The reality is it will likely change, and we've seen, based out of Denver, collisions involving drivers who have consumed cannabis, who have consumed, a hybrid of cannabis and alcohol. There was a significant increase in Denver, and so we can likely predict we'll see some road safety issues. Our service has done really well, thanks in part to the investment from the Police Services Board. We got ahead of the curve, and so we started training all of our frontline officers in standard field sobriety testing. And so we have over 400 officers, in fact, the highest percentage in the province, that are trained in standard field sobriety testing, which is good news. We have 12 drug recognition experts. By year end, we'll be at 20. Again, our percentage base is higher than the rest of the province. The science behind the testing is not as advanced as breath alcohol testing. And so that's going to be a work in progress. We're rolling out, actually, starting next week across our organization. We're rolling out an internal training program around cannabis and road safety. The issue is that our provincial government just sort of introduced new legislation around the Cannabis Act. And so we had been preparing on old legislation, and now there's been changed legislation. So we're working our way through that. We don't have any indication if by October 17th there'll be a provincial cannabis piece. The retail sales piece, I've always supported a controlled model. That being said, the private model will work because the supplier is controlled by government. Because again, our concern is that what we don't want to see is organized crime franchise, and you create a lawful business where now they're laundering, unlawful monies through a lawful business. And so, we've had a number of meetings with Minister Fedeli, Minister Mulrooney, Minister Tabolo. They've listened for the most part. The public consumption kind of caught us by surprise. I'm sure it caught all of you by surprise. But I think there's going to be significant impact. Our friends from the city of Waterloo are here on fire services, and so the potential for, grow ops, the 4 plant. You got to ask yourself, do you really want your police service monitoring how many plants are in a house? Is that really what you want us doing? Or is that, and is that what we want municipal bylaw doing, those types of pieces? So there's a few different pieces around that, but it also on system impact. I think one of the things that we have a duty, and I know that our friends from Horizon are here and other social agencies. We have a duty when we go to our residents for a service call. If we witness or we see other drug activity or excess alcohol use, we notify Family and Children's Services. And so I think there's some unseen consequences, unintended consequences that will roll out of this. But I think our big perspective, and for this, all of us here, is that we're going to sort through. I know we've got folks from the manufacturing industry, is that what is a sensitive safety workplace? And those are the struggles. And so we've seen variations. The Calgary Police Chief has put an abstinence model in place, and I wish him luck at the Human Rights Tribunal. And then so in Ontario, what we're trying to do is create a best practice, and we will be going to the Police Services Board this month. I actually think our board meeting is on the 17th, Tom. Maybe we'll celebrate. Yeah. It's called social sharing now, actually. But on a serious note, we'll be ready to launch an internal policy that will ensure and have confidence in our police service. And so there's challenges, but I think, it's like any other, this is for me a major change management project. There's going to be tweaks. We're going to have to change the way we do business. We're going to all have to find our way through some of these pieces, but I want to assure the community, I don't think that it's going to be simply out of control and unlawfulness and Mardi Gras and all those things. I think it will change some of our pieces, so we're coming up to Oktoberfest, which is a Bavarian festival, built around beer. And the reality is that as we modernize as a society, it may look very different.
Well, you mentioned the Calgary Police Service. I've noticed in the Ottawa Police Service, so less necessarily about the community than about your own workplace, because you're an employer as well. There's a lot of concern by employers just broadly about what this means. So if you're in construction and you got people that are swinging or have equipment or driving in the logistics business, they're concerned about legalization of what it means for their workplace and how they can monitor and make sure that they've got their employees being safe when they're responsible for them. You mentioned Calgary Police Service. What's the, and you mentioned this, I mean, is this one of those pieces that is going to be piecemeal about how each police service tries to address with their own officers what's acceptable and what's not? I mean, airline pilots, you can't drink within 24 or 36 hours before you operate an aircraft. I mean, are there going to be those sorts of things to make sure that you take care of your own police service members and the practical nature of the job they have to do?
Yeah, so, that's our big piece right now from the employer perspective. And so in my role as the past president of Ontario Chiefs, I've always really pushed a united model. So I think that policing in Ontario should be consistent, policy should be consistent, procedure should be consistent. And so from the western part to the eastern to the north part, we're doing business the same way, that our policies and procedures, recognizing the uniqueness of the communities we police. And so one of the things I learned as a chief is that, and particularly as the president of the OECP, is trying to put 52 AAA batteries in a transistor radio all the same way is really hard. And it's been a great leadership challenge, but we've just yesterday distributed draft policy across the province, and what we're looking for is consistent buy-in. So there would be, obviously a workplace sensitive safety position. So for example, our tactical response unit, which is often called out, requiring, obviously we have crisis negotiators on that team. They operate significant machinery, they operate significant weaponry. We want to make sure that they're fit for duty, that they're of sound mind, they're healthy, etc. So we're looking at changing that whole piece, and we are contemplating abstinence periods. So 8 hours, 24 hours, because that's one of the challenges, is that the science is evolving. The science of alcohol dissipation in our systems is very clear. There's a science behind it, it works. We all know that you can dance all you want. If you've had a bottle of wine, it's going to take you a certain period of time to clear yourself of that. So, for the employers in the room, I think that all of us will find ourselves in some form of labor arbitration. I think all of us will find ourselves before the Human Rights Tribunal, likely, and that's okay. We should not fret that. We should not fear that. We should let good democracy help us guide those decisions. But we will make our policy public through the Police Services Board this month as we move forward. But there will be certain positions. And we anticipate, we're a heavily unionized environment. I anticipate labor challenges and labor grievances. It's okay. We'll work our way through this. And so for all of you as employers, I think that that's going to be the piece. I know there's a number of lawyers in the room. There are, special law firms that are now specializing in cannabis law, and I think that that's healthy. I think we'll have a healthy debate over the next couple of years, and we'll work our way through. In many ways, I wish we could jump back in time and go back to the Prohibition era, because no doubt that system leaders and community leaders and politicians were going through the same discussion back then. But the one thing is clear, and I want to be very clear about this, is that over the last, cannabis has been illegal in Canada for 125 years, And as a policing industry, if we're really honest with ourselves, we have not done a very good job of managing, protecting children, protecting the vulnerable in our community. And so there needed to be a policy shift. And whether we agree with it or not, let's see where this goes from a policy perspective.
So, I guess connected to that is there's been talk by a variety of politicians across the country about decriminalized or legalized marijuana, about decriminalizing all drugs in Canada. I mean, we've got the opioid crisis. You've talked extensively about that. Our friends at the Lynn. I mean, it's a problem not only here in the but right across the country in every community. So maybe talk about that notion of from either policing, but then also the community aspect. Are you in favor of exploring that decriminalization of all drugs?
Wow, it's a heavy conversation for 8 in the morning, but I think obviously everybody in the room that has seen me on this, I'm fairly passionate about where we're going as a community. I'm fairly passionate about addiction. I'm fairly passionate about the vulnerable in our community, and so again, I think we got to look historically as we have a correctional system that 70% of the folks in our correctional system are waiting for actual court appearances. Only 30% are actually serving any sentencing, and so the judicial model and the correctional system is not designed to rehabilitate. It's not designed to really correct. Right? If you think about the term corrections, the history of that is that it was to correct, it was to change behavior, and we know that our recidivism rates, et cetera, it's not working. And we as a police service, over the last 4 years have really shifted our model, again, with support of the board, support of regional council around, why are we focusing on the most vulnerable? The most vulnerable needs a public health care model or a health care model. They don't necessarily need, to go through the judicial system because, they have a substance abuse issue. We put them into a correctional facility where, quite frankly, is rife with illegal drugs. So there's no safe supply in our correctional system. And so, Oxycontin, fentanyl patches, fentanyl has changed the drug game. And so, in the 1990s in our region, we talked a lot about crack cocaine. All of us couldn't find crack cocaine today. It would be impossible to buy. In fact, the street pharmacist would go, no, it's not, what? That product got discontinued. That line is gone. But I got this. And so I think that, when we talk about, the opiate crisis, it is by far the most complex issue we've ever faced because it's also concurrent with mental health. It has housing challenges. It has transition challenges. It crosses all sectors of our system leaders, and I think in our region we're doing very well. We work extremely well together. I often get approached by my colleagues, and they go, "What's happening in Waterloo? Like, I can't actually get funding from the Lynn for my police service, but how are you doing this? I can't work with social service. How are you doing this?" And so. I'm getting to your question, I think it's baby steps, right? I think that we're launching into a major public policy change. I think it's one of our biggest generational policy changes ever. And if you think about it, cannabis, right? And then they'll come with that will come edibles, there'll come smoking lounges. It's going to evolve consistently. But I've been pretty outspoken. I would say, 8 years ago as a police leader. There was probably myself and the Vancouver chief of the time, Chief Chu, and now Chief Palmer. My colleagues would look and go, wow, they're weird. They're different. They have different views. And now I would actually say is that, we're having much broader, meaningful dialogue where, the chief of Calgary, the chief of Edmonton, the chief of Montreal, the chief of Toronto, of all Ottawa, York, have all basically come out saying, you know what, we got to do business differently. What we're doing around enforcement isn't necessarily working. And so, we've changed our drug strategy. We focus on traffickers. We focus on illicit traffickers that are preying on young people, preying on vulnerable, and quite frankly are fueling other illicit trades. And so, we've had a couple of shootings in our region in the last 10 days. Although those are ongoing investigations, I can tell you that those investigations are tied to illicit organized crime to the drug trade. A lot of the root causes of our crime is equated to the drug trade. And so we got to have an honest dialogue. What happened at King and Pandora is tragic. But the reality is that the general community is not at risk. That individual was at risk, and we have to look upstream. So how did that individual get to there? And so, based on my comments, the Canadian Chiefs decided, because we have a couple of federal parties that are talking decrim, and so I've just been asked to sit on a national committee with chiefs looking at the decriminalization model and developing public policy around that. And so I think it's baby steps, but I think we got to look at doing business differently. What I really like is a medical model, a transition care center where we look at, how do we, it's almost like a wet house, in many ways, where we take, if you think back to the 80s and 90s in downtown Kitchener, some of the issues we had, some of the success was transitioning alcoholics into rehab and then getting them a healthy lifestyle. So the decrim thing, I'm kind of torn, because we still have laws in our society, and what's next. But the reality is, when you talk to people with lived experience, I've had people say to me, my choice, some people drink alcohol, but my choice is recreationally, I like to use a synthetic drug. That's